So I started filming this cruise review yesterday. It's been really wonderful to just kind of breathe and feel a little bit like we've come out of this pandemic. And then this happened. That is my grandfather. We are currently on Royal Caribbean's Harmony of the Seas on a family vacation. It is July 2022, and he has just tested positive for COVID-19. So I am here to tell you what the COVID protocols were like to get onto the ship and what the procedures are like now that he's positive as we are currently sailing. I have to admit, I was pretty hesitant to come on a cruise as we are kind of emerging from the pandemic. Clearly, it's still around, but it's eased a little bit. It was the least desirable of vacation options I wanted to choose from, but you know, it's been 2.5 years of COVID. I have both vaccinations and a booster, as does my family, so we felt pretty confident getting on the cruise ship and enjoying a family vacation. So for Royal Caribbean specifically, the protocols as of July 2022 was that all adults had to be fully vaccinated, with their final dose being at least 14 days before sailing, and they also needed to have a negative COVID test within 48 hours. And here it says, unvaccinated kids ages 2 to 11 must show a negative PCR test result taken no more than 3 days before boarding. This cruise left out of Port Canaveral, Florida. I am from New York, so I flew down from New York a couple of days ahead of the cruise, hung out in Disney for a little bit. I did a quick at-home just to, ease my mind that I was okay, and that came back negative. And then the next morning, I left Disney property to go get an official COVID test, a PCR test, and that gave me the results that I needed to bring to the cruise ship before boarding, and fortunately that was negative as well. So it gave me peace of mind knowing that everybody on the cruise ship had to follow those procedures. I knew everyone was vaccinated getting on the ship, and I knew they also proved to be negative for COVID right before cruising. On the ship, you did not have to wear a mask at all. Of course you could, and actually Royal Caribbean, when I arrived in my room, there were 2 masks ready to go for my use if I needed it. I did not feel like I needed it at any point until today when we got this news, but they did provide masks. So we didn't have to wear them if we didn't want to, but the crew did remain fully masked the entire cruise, except for the pool decks and the outside spaces like the rock climbing area and the abyss slide. Those crew members that we passed did not have masks, presumably because it's an outdoor space. But other than that, every single crew member that I've met has had their mask on. So now, what is it like once you test positive for COVID-19? I first have to say that yes, my grandfather is 89 years old, but he does have full vaccination as well as, I think, 2, possibly 3 booster shots at this point. So he's pretty set on that front. His symptoms were a cough that has been progressing the last couple of days. He thought it was just an irritation in his throat, and then today he went down to the infirmary. We have one more day. Tomorrow we arrive back in Port Canaveral and we're going to be leaving the ship. I don't know what the plan is for him and my grandmother. I just got news minutes ago that she tested negative, but they are currently they were sent back to their room, so I'm not sure what the guidelines are there, but I'm hoping to end this video by doing a little Q&A with my grandfather and possibly my grandmother to learn more about what it's like to have COVID-19 and how this cruise line handles that. To set the stage, we are 1 week out from returning from our cruise, and 12 out of 19 of our family members have tested positive for COVID-19. You were the first one to test positive actually on the ship. So how are you feeling?
I feel good.
Yeah?
I still have nasal drip. I could have played golf Wednesday, but I decided I didn't want to go through the bother of explaining to them that I have COVID and I'm infecting them even though we're outside. So I just decided not to. But I felt I could have.
So I'm curious to know, because honestly, nobody's filled me in on this. When you finally decided to go down to the infirmary to figure out what was going on, were you going down there under the impression that you had COVID?
I mean, I wasn't dying of COVID, nowhere near it. I wasn't suffering, but I was annoying everybody with the coughing. And it was pretty obvious that I had something. And It probably was COVID. Within 5 minutes, I was sitting down and she was asking me questions, and I was asking her questions. And I said, how many people have come down for COVID? Oh, she said, I wasn't here yesterday, but the day before, she said there was a mob, and your number 17 today.
Oh boy. That's already enough, because those 17 people interacted with at least 3 other people, and then it just continues beyond that to cover the entire ship.
Yeah. I said, what's the treatment? And the doctor said, well, I can give you Tylenol, I guess an equivalent of Sudafed, decongestant. Yeah, Tylenol, a decongestant, and a nasal spray. Oh, so they escorted Mom and I. First of all, I said, well, you're going to test my wife. She said, no, we won't do that down here. We have another group called the ambulatory. This is going to give you a little more insight into how much COVID was going on. They had another group, several groups, as a matter of fact, of people going around the ship testing people who were exposed. Knowingly exposed by the fact that either like I went down to get tested, and then my wife was next to me. But they didn't test her down in the medical office. They later came by the room and tested her. Meanwhile, we were both escorted, and I was telling you a little bit about it, like the inside innards of the ship, to up some freight elevator up to the 11th floor, 11th deck, and then we came out of some door inside the hallway of the starboard side that we were on, and then we walked all the way down the hallway, almost across the whole ship, from front to where we were near the back, and that was it. Then immediately the phone started ringing. It was guest services and special services, and they wanted to know what I was going to do after the ship. And they sent me, the door knocked, and some guy left me a letter explaining all the things that they're going to do for me. For example, I now had free room service.
That's a nice perk.
I had free movies, some other stuff. I never used any of it. I mean, actually. And transportation to a hotel. Explanation that they would pay me up to $250 a day for hotel room, up to $100 a day for food, and car rental.
What was the limit on that? So you were leaving, the disembarkation was the very next day after you tested positive. So how many days were they going to pay you to stay in Florida, essentially, instead of flying back home? Was it 5 days?
Till I tested positive.
Until you tested negative?
Till I tested negative, right.
Right, okay. So you test positive in the infirmary. Grandma tests negative at the time once she got back to the room and they came to test her. But they kept you both quarantined in your cabin, correct?
Right.
So then
First of all, Grandma didn't want to leave. I had to convince her to go away and go watch the show, go to the show, go to dinner, enjoy herself, and stay away from me.
And that was allowed, technically, especially according to CDC. If she is exposed to you, but she's testing negative, she is allowed to kind of go about her life as normal.
Yes.
And just to clarify, in the travel options that Royal Caribbean provided you, you mentioned the monetary amount that they would give you or reimburse you. Were they Reimbursed. Okay. And were they taking responsibility for booking that travel, booking the hotel that you were going to be staying at?
No.
Or you had to book it?
Fortunately, I had already booked it.
Right. You were going to spend one extra night in Florida anyway before flying home, before all the COVID nonsense. So then did they help you extend that hotel, or you had to call the hotel and extend?
No, they were not involved in that at all.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that.
They also were willing to pay a fee or reschedule my airline up to $400.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. You wonder how much money they burn through now that COVID is a thing every sailing. I can't imagine how many people they are dealing with that have come down with COVID.
When we finally got off the boat, we were deposited right outside the boat, and there were about 100 people sitting there that were all COVID. They were being transported, free transportation to their hotel or to wherever they were going. I am also being reimbursed for that day.
Really?
Not me, whoever paid for my ticket.
Right, it was a gift to you and Grandma to go on this cruise.
Yes. I think the ship probably could have done more as far as cleaning up, like you said, in the casino.
Normally when you're cruising, you have to wash your hands constantly. There's already those hand sanitizing stations set up. So
every elevator had it. There were plenty of those.
Right.
There was a lot of those, no question about that.
Yeah,
and we used it all the time. Every time we went to the elevator.
I agree with you that there was kind of this false sense of security, especially because the protocols ahead of the cruise. But I can see, like, I got tested with my PCR test on that Friday, and there's still 48 hours between Friday and when we set sail. That I was as safe as I could be. I kept my mask on during those 2 days, but who knows what everyone else on the ship did. So people could have brought it on right then. And then also the islands, each island had different rules, and I'm sure not everyone was wearing their masks on those islands despite the rules. So it was easy for COVID to get on the ship. And I think that was the first time since the pandemic started that I had this false sense of safety. And looking back now, I wish even though I had that sense of security, knowing that I was vaccinated and boosted, I wish I wore my mask in those more crowded areas of the ship. Like we were talking on the phone earlier, the casino, that was such, you said, a petri dish. And I 100% agree. I didn't see anyone wiping down the screens. Maybe it was happening behind the scenes. I didn't see a lot of Purell stations. There were a couple, but there were a ton of people in just that one space. Yeah. And everyone unmasked, and we're kind of just stewing. The only time I saw people wearing masks on the cruise was down in the infirmary when I came to meet you and Grandma. Everyone waiting in line had a mask on, and that was my first thought. I was like, everyone in this line right now has COVID. Whether they know it or not, they have it.
All the people who had COVID managed to not get it back.
So far. Yeah, I tested positive on April 21st. I was positive for 11 days, and we sailed beginning July 10th. And I'm still, as of right now, what is today, July 23rd, negative. Most of our family now has COVID, but everyone is recovering from it. So I'm really glad to hear that. And I appreciate you talking to me about what went down, because honestly, I was only hearing bits and pieces of how Royal Caribbean handled it. And I was really curious to know what the protocols are in place. I knew what we needed to do before getting on the ship, but I didn't know what they were expected to do once they had people confirmed positive. All right. Love you.
Take care.
Say hi to Grandma for me.
So clearly that was an insert from the future, and present me has no idea how this is going to end. I'm fingers crossed that everything is fine and he has recovered well and he's happy, healthy, and safe, and nobody else in our family has contracted anything. Nobody else on the cruise ship has contracted anything. I'm just hoping all is well. Now, I do want to say that this is not a negative on Royal Caribbean at all. I want to say that I think the cruise line did as much as they possibly could to ensure the health and safety of all their guests. I'm grateful to them for having such strict guidelines because it did give me peace of mind, and I would sail again. I think I'm making this video more for, well, personal documentation. I like to, have these records of what happened, especially when I'm sailing with my family, but also to help those who may be a little more at risk to getting COVID. It might be something that you are going back and forth on. Should I sail? Should I not sail? So hopefully you found the information that he provided helpful, and it can help you make your decision in the future. So I hope to be sailing again really soon, and I will keep you posted when I do. Thank you so much.